It's great to be here. I'm Yosef, and I work on some different developer tools. I'm a PM lead, and some of the tools that my team works on is the command line on Windows, the Subsystem for Linux, and then this setup scripts. Nice, we have a WSL fan?
Huge.
Very good, nice.
And I'm Joey. I'm the program manager responsible for primarily for PowerShell Core, which is our open source cross-platform edition of PowerShell that we GA'd earlier this year, as well as a lot of the work that we've been doing with OpenSSH ported to Win32, and a lot of the tooling around PowerShell. So the VS Code extension, the script analyzer, and a sort of long tail of PowerShell-related tooling.
So Joey and I work on different projects. We're in different teams at the company. And one of the things we've enjoyed is staying in sync and sharing what we're seeing. I'm more of a client developer focused, and Joey's with
more
PowerShell.
IT pro, DevOps
Yeah.
kind of side. So we come from very different sort of roles that we're looking to fulfill, but the fact that we both live in the console and
Yeah.
tooling space means that we end up getting to interact quite a bit, which is fun.
Yep. Cool. So let's get started. Thank you to the sponsors. So agenda. Joey, you want to?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the new Microsoft culture that's really enabled a lot of the work that we've been doing in these spaces, as well as our presence here and sort of the shift in mindset that we've enjoyed happening over the last few years. We'll also be talking about the title of this talk, which is Bootstrapping a Machine in One Click. This is using Boxstarter, which is essentially a wrapper around Chocolatey, in order to take a machine from nothing up to the productive workstation that you expect it to be. We'll also be talking about some other projects that sort of follow in this cultural vein. So I'll be talking about PowerShell and OpenSSH. Yosef will be talking about WSL, the Windows Subsystem for Linux. And then we'll take some Q&A. So the culture here. So Satya published a book, Satya Nadella, our CEO, sometime last year, I believe, that sort of discussed a lot of the cultural changes that we underwent when he took over as CEO. So one of the first ones right off the bat is sort of avoiding this not invented here bias, right? So it was very common at Microsoft for us to sort of see an opportunity or a piece of software that we really thought would be cool for Microsoft purposes, and we would have some PMs spec that work out, and we would sort of rebuild an entire application from the ground up. And in today's world, we're looking a lot more at the kinds of open source technologies and the products that many of our competitors or our co-opetitors have built before we just go and start writing code, right? And so some of the examples there, we're using Docker, SSH, VS Code is leveraging Electron, which is the sort of Chromium-based desktop applications. WSL is obviously using a bunch of Linux distros as their user mode. So all of these things, we ask ourselves, hey, do we really need to go and write a product from scratch, or is there something out there that we can leverage with its own ecosystem of existing modules or libraries that'll really bootstrap us faster and take advantage of the work that's already been done out there? Another aspect of our cultural shift has been to be as data-driven as possible, right? And so when we first started this, we were extremely data-driven. Everything needed to have a number behind it. And as Yosef and I discussed, there's been a little bit of pivot back away from that, which is that, hey, we still need to have these holistic sort of long-term strategic understandings of where our products need to go. But we try to be as data-driven as possible. So if there's data that we can use to make a decision, we try to bias ourselves in that direction where we're leveraging that data. Another thing I want to talk about here is telemetry. So I know telemetry gets a really bad rap. This is sort of instrumentation phoning home to Microsoft. But we've really tried to do our best to implement telemetry in a privacy-minded way. Make sure this stuff is fully anonymized, that it's being transmitted over secure channels. Even in PowerShell, we share the telemetry that we get back on PowerShell with the community so that they understand the kinds of decisions that we're making using those insights. So really, when you have that telemetry there, A/B testing and all that is much, much easier. We've also moved towards shipping earlier and more often. right? So this is all about, in the same vein as data-driven, we're really trying to tighten up those feedback loops that tell us what kinds of things you guys are doing with the product, run into the problems that might arise earlier, rather than having these sort of 5-year ship cycles where we put out a new version of Windows and it's going to take 3 to 5 more years before we're able to address those concerns. You see this in the Windows Insider program. You see this in PowerShell shipping alphas and betas, or WSL came out very early on as a preview. These sorts of things, we want to get that feedback and tighten up those loops. So focusing on the customer experience as well. This is really just saying, hey, let's put the customer experience first. Let's make sure that people are happy using the software that they're using, and that Microsoft is providing them these delightful experiences, rather than trying to shoehorn a business model into the product design, right? So we've been told by Satya, make sure that you enable the customer to be more productive and to enjoy using our software, and the business model will follow, right? So that's been really enabling for us, because it means that we just sort of can do the right thing. Even working across teams, we make sure we do the right thing, irrespective of the sort of business model or the business implications. And lastly, being a great partner, right? This is, again, Yosef and I come from different organizations, although we're moving closer every day, but organizationally, working well with each other and doing the right thing internally is super important. Also outside the company, working with Chef and Puppet, or Red Hat, in the Azure support agreement, or the Adobe and Salesforce deals that Satya was talking about at Ignite last week. So yeah, these sorts of things just really across the board have enabled a transformational shift at Microsoft.
All right. So in addition to that, open source. It's a big deal at Microsoft. It's been a big deal for many years now, and in many ways. So whether it's contributing to existing projects, taking our own source and making it open, and then moving it forward in the open, or using open source, all aspects of it, and doing that in a healthy way, learning how to be participants in the open source community when you're a Microsoft employee. There's a lot of learning that the company has been going through, and it's taken years. And when I talk to people at different enterprises, it's the same thing that any company has to address and solve, and how are we going to do this regardless of the size of our company. And Microsoft's been doing this for years. The good thing is it can be a painful road, but it does lead to some great things, and we're seeing more and more of that come out of Microsoft now, with more teams working in the open. And Microsoft has board members on the .NET Foundation, the Linux Foundation, and it's just really engaged. It's a lot of fun to be an employee at a company when that type of activity is happening, and you can do more work in the open. Interestingly, as you get stronger at working in the open as a company, it becomes a natural next step to start applying what you're learning in the open to how you're doing your internal projects. So for example, we call a term can be internal source. So essentially, just because I'm not on the team that's making a product doesn't mean I can't see their source, doesn't mean I can't submit a pull request to that repo. And if they have the CI and they have the right processes in place, there's no reason why anyone in the company with the interest and the ability can't contribute to that project. So setting up internally in that way is really great. Participating in open standards. So an example of this is the WebDriver standard, which is used for testing web browsers. So people in the Edge team have been a part of the Selenium community for many years. And recently, in recent years, we took that standard and we looked at the Appium open source project. And we built a tool to test Windows apps using Appium. And so this was our way of contributing to the Appium community. And so you can use the tooling that you're using to run tests for other platforms like iOS and Android, and you can use that same tooling and target Windows. And really acknowledging that modern life is cross-platform. So this is true at home. Most of us have a mix of platforms and the devices that you have in your home. and at work. So you could be using different cloud providers, you could be using different OSs on the back ends, and this is reality. And you see Microsoft embracing this reality in products like App Center, where you can do testing on different platforms using different frameworks. And it's right there, and you use what you need. So it's pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about the title of this talk, which is Bootstrapping a New Machine in One Click. So that's taking a clean machine, running a script, and boom, you got your workstation set up, ready to go. And how do we get there? How many of you are familiar with Boxstarter? Okay, cool. So what this project is a Boxstarter scripts. And Boxstarter is a wrapper around Chocolatey. So it is essentially a Chocolatey script with you put a bunch of Choco install commands. You can do other PowerShell commands in there. And then it turns off UAC so that the OS isn't getting in the way of installing things. And it also handles reboots with password included. So it can reliably go through and update the machine, both with software and running Windows Update, and optional features, and handle the reboots for you. So it provides a nice value add. One of the cool things is Boxstarter also has a click once installer, which we'll show you. So before we talk more about how the project works, we're going to jump over to an Azure VM. And we're going to start one. We made a demo script for this event, and it's up on the repo. If you want to take a look at the GitHub repo, it's aka.ms devsetup. You can check that out. And hopefully, okay, that's not what I expected to see. Okay, I might have to come back to that if that's going to do that.
Do we have networking here?
I thought I did. Tested this earlier. Pardon for a moment.
Oh, we need to be on the internet.
Okay. We'll try one more time. I was on the internet.
Good old Wi-Fi, right?
All right, while it's doing that, okay.
Connected.
Let's try one more time.
Yay.
Okay. Okay, so here we are. We got a clean machine, and here's our PowerShell script. So you're welcome to go take a look at this on GitHub. And the nice thing with Boxstarter is you can do a click once, and so that's a URL that's going to run the whole script for us. So we'll go ahead and kick this off here, and we can come back and see when it's done in a little bit. So everything should be fast. So again, the reason why I like this approach to running the script is you can give someone a link, and they don't need to know what the stuff is. They don't need to know what Boxstarter Chocolatey are. They don't need to know how they work. And this is Boxstarter asking for the password so it knows how to boot back in for you. All right, and this thing is off and running. Cool. There it goes. Okay, we'll come back to that in a little bit. So what's going on inside the script? And how is the project organized? So at the root of the project, you've got these recipes. And the recipes are based on different personas. And rather than having all these recipes in there with a lot of duplicated instructions, we made a scripts folder. And if you go in the scripts folder, you can see some common some common code that you're going to want to use in most of the scripts. So here's an example of file export settings. Rather than having to have as code in my recipe, I could just say run file explorer settings, right? Now let's go back to the demo. And we'll walk through it. So first thing the script is doing is it's disabling UAC. And that's just the prompt when you're trying to install something. It's telling Windows to stop doing that.
This one here is my addition, which is basically telling PowerShell, hey, for the duration of this script, don't throw confirmation prompts. We use -force throughout near the bottom, but we were running into some issues where underlying functions were throwing up confirmation prompts. And so here we're saying, hey, if you get a confirmation prompt, please don't throw it. Just continue on.
So the next block, all the way down to where it starts setting execute script, is really just logic to tell Boxstarter where the helper scripts are. So if you're on a different fork, this will find the right matching helper script rather than having to deal with hard-coded URL and edits and maintaining that. It just figures out relative to where the script you're running is where the helper scripts are. So that's all that is. And then you can see that it's running through these different helper scripts. Refresh environment does a shell refresh path update. And we just throw that in there to make sure everything's up to date before the next one kicks off. Hyper-V is turning on the optional feature, the optional Windows feature for you. Same with WSL. In fact, WSL turns on the optional feature for you. And we install the Ubuntu distro for you. And later on, actually, you'll see it a little further down, we install tools inside that distro for you, all automated. And that was something that we worked on over the last few months to enable that. So that's pretty cool. And then you've got some more Chocolatey install instructions and some PowerShell module instructions. And that's really where you're getting to personalizing it for the persona. And you're starting to get away from the more helper scripts. And then in the Chocolatey example, Chocolatey Fest example, we pull down some GitHub repos. And then for fun, we grab the image off of the Chocolatey Fest website and set it to the desktop wallpaper. Why not? And then just to clean it up, we turn UAC back on. That's important. Make sure Windows Update's going. And then we run Windows Update for you as well, so you don't have to deal with that when you come back to the machine. So that's an overview. And a little bit later, I'm going to show you the workflow and how you can edit one and test it, because that's important. The whole purpose of this, just to step back for a second, is provide samples that you can use as a starting point, fork it, make it your own. Don't feel obligated to commit anything back. But if you have something that you found that is useful and you think could be useful to others, we would love to see the PRs come back. But this is all about take this, fork it, make it your own, and make it exactly how you want it. The recipes are probably only going to give you about 80% of what you want, but that's a good start. So that's the purpose of this project. All right. Okay, and looking ahead, we're going to keep working with the Chocolatey community. So, in fact, Rob and Gary and Matt, who was the starter of Boxstarter, have all been great. We've had regular talks with them, and they watch the issue board on this project with us, and we work together. So, hoping to continue that, hoping to continue adding scripts, and would love to see pull requests. All right, now Joey's going to talk about PowerShell.
Awesome. So, PowerShell Core, as I mentioned, this is our brand new edition. This is also PowerShell 6, as many of you know it. Why did we do this, right? Why are we cross-platform, open source, all that? So in the old world, PowerShell was built for Windows system management, right? There's all these disparate set of system-level APIs that didn't really integrate very well together, right? You had COM and Win32 and .NET. There's reg keys you're dealing with and CSV files, and maybe you're pulling in some JSON. XML is a hairy one that is tough to grapple with. VB script. So Windows PowerShell was really a funnel, a glue language to bring these things all under one hood and to say, hey, this is the clearinghouse, so to speak, for all these different kinds of APIs and data structures that you can sort of normalize in a single way. So that was Windows PowerShell, and that was the goal there. And I think after 10 years of that, we've pretty much succeeded on that front. Today, you have to do a lot more of this higher level cloud resource management, right? So you're dealing with Azure and ARM, you're dealing with maybe some third-party clouds like AWS, VMware, maybe you're doing some stuff on-premise with Hyper-V, maybe you've got some third-party SaaS applications, the ServiceNows or Splunk or Jira or all this stuff exists out there, and they all talk REST and JSON, right? So one of the things we wanted to do in PowerShell Core was really beef up our JSON and REST support to make sure that we're more compliant with the sort of modern way that a lot of these APIs are handled. But we also knew that people were moving to containers. People want ephemeral runtimes. Statelessness was really important. So we made sure to sort of slim PowerShell down. We wanted it to work on any platform so that regardless of whether your containers are hosted in Linux or Windows world, you can run the same scripts. And we knew that in the modern world, because we're moving much, much quicker, PowerShell needed a cloud cadence as well. So moving it out of Windows allowed us to do more experimentation, update it more quickly. We're now on a 6-month release cycle with PowerShell Core. So these two scenarios together are actually what we're trying to address with PowerShell Core. And we know that the first one's going to continue to be a big issue for people, and we don't want that to go away. We also know that PowerShell Core today doesn't completely subsume Windows PowerShell, but we are working to get there. And at some point in the future, we hope that you can say that PowerShell Core is the one and only PowerShell that you use. So why does any of that necessitate moving to open source, right? Like we could have done all that proprietary and just like we did Windows PowerShell and move on. Well, first off, we wanted this shared ecosystem of improvements, right? We recognize that there's a lot of stakeholders that have a vested interest in PowerShell succeeding, and we wanted to make sure that no one was duplicating efforts across those ecosystems. So, despite the fact that I sit in Azure and I report up to Azure management, I work very closely with folks at Amazon. We have an ex-Microsoft guy who works at AWS that sits on the PowerShell committee that continues to drive design improvements there. We work very closely with VMware. We've worked with Google in the past to make sure that PowerShell supports the Google Cloud Engine, and we know that all of these things help all of us, right? This is why we do open source. We also knew that open source was a forcing function for agility. So we knew that having processes that were transparent and written down in a public location that said, this is when we accept features, this is when we stabilize, this is what a breaking change is, and when and why we'll take it. All of these things, being in an open source model meant that we had to hold ourselves accountable to all of those standards and make sure that we were driving PowerShell in a very systematic way. Today, PowerShell is totally community driven. We have a monthly community call, third Thursday of every month. All of our planning and road mapping and all of that stuff happens within GitHub issues. We take roughly 50% of the PRs that we take are coming from the community. So this is actually much, much higher of a number than I expected after a year and a half. But it's really been awesome to see just the amount of input and comfortability that people outside Microsoft have with contributing code and features into PowerShell. So, and you can find it here at github.com PowerShell. Another one I was PM for a long time, I'm not at the moment, but I drove this for two and a half years, was our native Win32 port of OpenSSH. So this was another great example of us doing open source, I think doing open source right, so to speak, air quotes. For those of you unfamiliar with OpenSSH, it's a set of tools that are used for remote management securely, making remote connections to another terminal on another machine. It's used for secure file transfers, as well as public-private key pair authentication. So it does a whole host of other things like tunneling of traffic and all this other stuff. But this is really the big ones that people use it for, and outside of Windows, it is absolutely the industry-wide standard for all this stuff. How many of you use SSH? Yeah, so okay, great. So why did we ship it in Windows? We had WinRM. I don't know if any of you got to see the Ansible talk today. I think we all know that there are some problems in WinRM. It works great for what it is, but we also knew that if we wanted to play nice with the rest of the world, this sort of cross-platform reality that Yosef was talking about, we needed to use this open interoperable standard to make sure that other people could connect to us and we could connect to other people. Also, we really wanted to signal some goodwill here. So we were platinum level sponsors with OpenSSH. We've worked very, very closely with them to make sure that our work can eventually be accepted upstream. We knew that we didn't want to build a fork and just do things the Microsoft way and go off in our own direction building a Microsoft OpenSSH, which is why I'm very particular not to use that term. This is Win32 OpenSSH for now, and then hopefully when we're upstream, we're just another compile of OpenSSH portable, which is the product that every other operating system uses. We also put some other tools in Windows. Curl and tar, I think, both shipped in the 1803 release. Native curl.exe and tar.exe. And some of that was some personal motivation for us. We wanted to interop really well with tools like Docker. But we also were trying to get away from this not invented here bias that we were talking about before and really make sure that we're not duplicating the efforts for these sorts of things. And when you need a nano server, a thing that allows you to extract and archive, why build a zip tool from scratch when we can take in tar? So yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Joey. All right. How many of you knew that we put curl and tar in Box? Just out of curiosity. Okay, a few hands. It's pretty cool. We keep watching Windows for surprises. We've had a few surprises over the last few years, and it's been a lot of fun. What's that? You can say that again. Yeah, good.
One thing I forgot to mention, OpenSSH, the SSH client does now ship by default since 1803. SSH.exe is on your path, and the server is an optional feature that you can turn on.
Very good. So the subsystem for Linux. So this was announced just over 2 years ago at a build at that time. And what it is, it's a way to run Linux binaries on Windows without a VM. And it's installed as an optional feature. It was in beta for a good year or so after it was first launched. Now it's no longer in beta. And so it gives you a command line interface to running those. It gives you the bash shell. So, and this is really focused on command line tooling. And you can run the actual Ubuntu or whatever distro binaries directly on Windows. And it's done that using a subsystem that translates syscalls underneath. And so it's very lightweight. And at least from a CPU performance perspective, it does very well on perf metrics. And so it's been very popular. It also allows you to do interop between Windows tooling and Linux tools. You can even do path translation. And one of the great examples we have right now is you can use VS Code in Windows to debug a Node.js project running in WSL. And the power of that is if you're going to run that on a Linux backend, why not run the actual same thing locally? And now you don't have to do a VM. So, and then you get the interop. So there's a lot of cool things that WSL brings to the table for how it improves Windows as a dual machine. And since we launched, we've been expanding the number of distros you can use. And these are the distro vendors themselves publishing the distros to the Microsoft Store. And you can expect to see more show up. There's not a lot of work that they have to do in terms of, if you think they have to do like rebuilds and lots of heavy lifting, it's not really the case. It's pretty close to their container image that they're using, and there's some work. They got to do some packaging. Not to say that it's easy, but it's not the heavy lifting that you might expect of bringing a distro to run on Windows. Sure. Yeah, you can. Yeah, so the question is, could you install distros without the Microsoft Store? Okay. The answer is yes. We just put some documentation on about it. as far as you can take the distro launcher, which is open source, you take that, it's on GitHub, and you can take your distro bits and you can package your own WSL app package using your own distro bits, and then you can do the side loading of the distro on the machine. And we've also got instructions on how, if you're using Enterprise for Business or the Enterprise Store, how to use that as well for WSL.
Actually, I think it's as simple as a PowerShell call now, I believe. You can do it on LTSP, which doesn't have Microsoft Store.
Sorry. Yes. Everything I said is true, plus, like, for example, a good example is if you look at the Chocolatey Fest demo on the setup scripts, we do command line install of the distro. Yeah, so that's what's going on there. So yes.
So what I was interested is, like, I have 3 laptops and I'm going to install, let's say, a bunch of flavor. I don't want to download it off the internet 3 times.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we can follow up on this too. So I want to make sure it's clear. This is not instead of anything that you had on Windows before. This is additive. This is making Windows a better box to get your work done. If you don't need it, it's fine. We're still got the command line tools that you had before. In fact, we keep adding to them. That's the spirit of this. It's not to replace.
I'm the PowerShell guy. I love WSL, use it all the time. We have tons of customers that run PowerShell core inside of WSL. Like, the world's gotten crazy.
Yep. PowerShell and WSL on stage together. OK, so now we're going to check in our VM. And I don't know if we're going to have time to go through the bootstrapping and one-click demo, but we can walk through the steps, because it looks like we're short on time. OK. So let's see how our VM is doing. Let's see.
So the Boxstarter script, as you saw before, was sort of representative of installing a lot of these technologies, WSL, PowerShell core. So hopefully we see them pop in right here
That's right.
when we open this VM.
OK, so it's still going, but you can see we've got browsers installed. We've got VS Code installed. And it's been doing some Windows updates. So if we open the Start menu here, you're going to see there's Ubuntu 18. You've got Python. You've got Git. So it's on it's made a lot of progress since we started it. So definitely check that out. And again, there's this will run all the way through and install everything in there without you having to be attending it. OK, rather than do the actual steps, I'm going to tell you about them, and hopefully that does the job on the next part here, just for time. Hold on. There we go. Oh, sorry. I lost my spot. Sorry.
Animations.
We did a lot of it. We spent a lot of time on those. OK. They're important, right? OK, here's the steps. And it's really open source. Working with open source in general is you can just apply the same workflow. A little different, though, because you're going to want to test this thing. And it's not always obvious how you're going to test it when it's installing software, right? So take the devsetup project, fork it, make a branch on your fork, edit the script and commit it in that fork. Okay? And then now you've got an online accessible place to test your fork, right? To test your changes. And here's where you use a Hyper-V VM or a VM of your choice. Go in and use the Boxstarter link that you can update to refer to your fork in the branch. So there's a template on the repo where you'll see the template pieces. So at that point, you take that and you replace the pieces in the Boxstarter link, the click once link, kick it off in the VM, and it'll just run all the way through, and you don't have anything else to do. You just make sure that it finished. So those are the basic steps. And then at that point, you can continue working inside your fork. And when you have something you want to share, send a PR back to here. That's it. So,
yeah, in summary, yeah, we talked about the new Microsoft culture, the fact that we're being more transparent, open, using as much of the existing world of software as we can without reinventing the wheel. We showed the script of bootstrapping this machine in one click. I know I'm going to go home and build like my perfect Boxstarter script now that stands up my dev machine. Talked about the spirit of us sort of carrying this culture forward into projects like PowerShell, Win32 OpenSSH, Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Yep.
And now, unless Yosef wants to speed run the GitHub contribution, we can open up to Q&A. Yeah.
yeah.
I know that there have been I/O performance issues
Yeah.
with WSL. Is there any kind of timeline on improvements for that? I know you
Right.
guys are working on it.
Yeah. So the question is, disk I/O with WSL is slower. We acknowledge it, and it's something we've been looking into and investigating how to make interaction with the NTFS file system faster. I can't share any timeline other than we know it's an issue, and we know it's one of the top issues that customers want us to work on. So we've heard you. And hopefully we'll have good things in the future, but I can't say more than that.
I know that one workaround that's been mentioned is to exclude the file system path to the subsystem from Windows Defender.
Yeah.
Is that really a risk?
I'm told that Defender does have some logic for scanning these Linux files and content that's getting created in there, but I wouldn't want to make an official statement on degree of risk that you're adding on by doing that.
Understood.
But we can have the entire team, including the devs and the PM team, are all available online. The GitHub repo is, well, if you go to Learn WSL, there's a bunch of info there, but if you go to GitHub Microsoft WSL, you can file that issue, and I guarantee you the dev team and the PM will look at it and offer what they can for guidance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my question is for OpenSSH. Do you know where the current status of GSS API support is with OpenSSH and what the plans are for key exchange?
Yeah, the question is, what's the open status of GSS API support? So I'm not sure. I can say that we don't support PAM today, which I think might be a critical part of that. I could be mistaken there. We do have an aspect that allows you to register a generic LSA provider. So it's sort of the PAM equivalent that lives in the Windows security constructs. I don't want to misspeak, as not the total security expert here. But yeah, I think we have this gap right here in terms of, I don't know, can I ask a follow-up question, actually? What do you want out of GSS API support?
Mostly on the client side. So one of the things we've dealt with years of like having a multi-environment, having Linux, Mac, Windows. We spent a lot of time making sure that Kerberos can work across the board, right? So that CentOS or Red Hat, our machines are all native now. And some of the client-side utilities, such as for on Windows, can do GSS API key-based authentication from Kerberos. And we allow it to delegate the token, so that way you can SSH to a machine, and then to a machine, and a machine, and a machine, and chain along. And then those tokens are used to access network shares on Linux machines and everything. So it's sort of like a whole environment that works within that. And it, sort of not having GSS API play nice with everybody else in the environment on the Windows side is one of the lacking pieces to getting rid of having to install third-party SSH clients on Windows.
Yeah, totally. Have you filed an issue on that one?
No.
Okay, please do. We definitely track those, and understanding that scenario in a little more detail, like giving it a little bit of context would be really helpful, because we are trying to fill out like the MFA scenario, the sort of PAM-like, even if we can't get PAM, passing off to these other authentication providers, and then Profile creation is the other big one, just namely that the profile has to exist already on the target machine for you to remote to it. But yeah, please file an issue. Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask, the setup script project, how many of you find this interesting, like it might be useful? Okay, cool, awesome. If you want us, so if there's anything you want Microsoft to do differently with that project, please tell us. It sounds like we're on the right track, which makes me very happy. But if there's anything else we need to do, just please let us know. File an issue on that project, and that's the quickest way to get it in front of my attention. I've got a question in the back.
It's related but unrelated. Are we ever going to see just Windows vagrant boxes that we can use?
Windows.
I have not thought about it.
It's come up as a topic, but I can't recall any. There's nothing I can share. Sorry, but happy to follow up and find some questions like this. Like, we're not going to be the right spokesperson on the topic, but we're happy to connect you with the right people. Aha. Yeah. Okay.
On that topic, it's search IE.modern from another group for the IE testing.
Yeah.
They have vagrant downloads.
Right.
So there's like vagrant downloads, but it's kind of like you have to provide your own vagrant file, and it doesn't use like the vagrant. So all the type of automation tool chain you'd have to adapt to it to use IE Modern's, whatever they use. But yeah, the licensing, they have some techniques, and I don't know if the pages are still there. It's constantly moving around. It's like a moving speeding target.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine if we did it right, we would want to, go beyond that probably, and really just support a native standard vagrant toolchain. But
yeah, so it's like the vagrant will work. It's just you have to kind of supply your own vagrant file to get it to work, which people do. And they have a way to, it's like a TechNet type eval type thing, so you have to reset the licensing. They have some command line tool. But it would be nice if they recognize, like, people want to test Microsoft and make it easy on people, so we could have better integration to Windows. So, and right now, there's not like a non-commercial, open source license or something.
There was something in the iteration of walking through a testing I wanted to show you here in Hyper-V Manager. So if you haven't seen this, it's called Quick Create. There's a lot going on in the UI, but up in the upper right corner, Quick Create, and you can get a Windows or an Ubuntu instance, and it's just create virtual machine. It's there, and you don't have to deal with the licensing. You can just test it, and so I want to make sure you know that that's there.
And I imagine we're adding more to that, right, over time?
Yeah, I mean, that's the vision. You can also add lists if you have your own images that you want to have pop up there. That is meant to accommodate that. And I would love to see more options in that list, for sure.
PowerPoint, go. There we go.
Okay, I think that's it in terms of questions. We've got a break now, so feel free to grab a comfort break, and then we'll see you back in a few minutes.
Thanks,
very
guys.
much for joining
Cool.
us.
Thanks.